Thank you for joining us. Our topic this evening is frustration. I'm your host, Flint Anderson, and I want to jump right into it. All of us are dealing with a great deal more stress, anxiety, whatever we wrap around it, emotion that we want to call it, but we're all dealing with a lot more frustration right now, some more than others. I know I'm dealing with it. I know a lot of my peers are dealing with it. And it could be one thing, it could be another. It could be what's going on in the news, it could be what's going on in the world. But realistically, that doesn't add as much frustration or anxiety to our life as what we're dealing with internally, what we're dealing with at home, what we're dealing with at work. And when things are stressed and heightened, everything seems to be much worse than what it actually is. And dealing with frustration is one of the least effective learned skills that most of us have. Effectively learned skills. Maybe that's the right way to say that. No, we're not really taught how to deal with frustration. Some of us deal with it in a lot of different ways. Some people get mad and yell. Some people get angry and punch walls. Some people take it out on other people. Some people take it out on family members. Some people drink. Some people smoke. Some people do other things, all to alleviate the frustration. Sometimes it could be anxiety. Anxiety is usually determined from a lack of action. Not always. I'm not a doctor, but I've talked several times about how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with just the day to day actions or lack thereof that create the problems and the frustration in our life. But when you have external factors impacting you, when you're a business owner and your business is not growing the way it needs to, or maybe it's not going the way it needs to, or if you lost a client, that works for sales reps too. You're not closing as many deals as you need to be. At work, you can't seem to get things done. You're not getting the traction you want on particular projects. Those frustrations that directly impact our lives come from a lot of different sources, and we never really can predict when it's going to happen. The one thing that we do know is that it always, for sure, is going to happen. It's easy to ignore that part when things are going well and you're enjoying yourself and you feel like things are finally going your way and what have you. The thing is that I've learned over the years is that none of these habits that we form are terribly effective, except for anticipating the frustration when it comes and learning how to deal with it. What's the best way to deal with it? And all of these are my opinions. This is how I deal with it. One, you got to admit it. You have to admit that you're frustrated. People know something's wrong, especially those closest to you. They know something's going on. They may not know what, and they may not even be able to help. But it's okay to look at somebody and say, I'm really, really frustrated. I'm trying to deal with this. I'm trying to work it out. Does that mean you expect them to solve the problem? No. But sometimes just putting a word and a phrase in place in your own brain and saying it and putting it in place for theirs helps people, one, understand what you're going through, but two, it also helps you acknowledge that it's actually happening. Usually the frustration leads to anxiety as to, well, what if this doesn't work? What if this doesn't ever work? What if this doesn't come back together? What's going to happen? Oh my goodness. And we end up paying the price for a lot of thoughts and emotions and things that will never actually come true. One thing that's for sure is when you're putting in the work and you're doing what you need to do, then the tide will eventually turn back to where it was. Nothing stays the same, especially if you're putting into the work. Where's the frustration come from? The frustration comes from feeling like you should be getting more results from the work that you're putting in. Well, you know what? This last year, I only had to make 10 sales calls before I could hit my quota. And now I'm having to make 50. Well, so what? Now you make 50 and you hit your sales quota. Now, if you're sitting around, you're not doing anything, you deserve to be frustrated and you should have massive anxiety because you are earning it by the work that you're not doing and not putting in. But if you're doing the work, trust the process, make sure you're doing it correctly, and quit measuring yourself against where you want to be and measure yourself about where you started and from where you started, not about where you started, measure yourself from where you started. Because if you're constantly looking forward, which we have to be, and measuring yourself against a distance in the future or something that you need or something that you want or worse, something you're desperate to have, because no good decision has ever come from desperation, you're always going to be frustrated and you won't see the progress that you have made. But if you look and you look back, you say, I'm not where I want to be, but 2 weeks ago, a month ago, wherever your measuring stick is, here's where I started and here's what I've done since then. That massive amount of work that you've been putting in will eventually pay off. It's just not doing it in the same manner that your brain thinks it should, because success doesn't give a rip what is going on in your life. You have to pay dues no matter what. When things are going well, and you feel like you're on top of the world, usually it's because of the massive amount of work that you put in when you were frustrated or before you got started with being successful. And we forget that whenever those things start falling apart, because at some point we start to believe that we deserve it or that we earned it. And why am I having to do this again? Well, you know what? Guess what? If you want to live a life of freedom and abundance, there's going to be times where you have to sacrifice the freedom and abundance to maintain your freedom and rebuild your abundance. It's just the way of life. Talking to a very successful business owner friend of mine last night, and said the same thing. He was 3 or 4 times ready to just shut his entire company down. He has a huge organization. But it's just like, man, do I have to do this all over again? Very, very frustrated. Talking with another buddy of mine today, similar situation. We're in completely different industries, but it just sometimes seems like everything takes a turn at the same time. Well, that's maybe true that that's happening, but it doesn't mean that the stars are aligned against you. It just means that that's the way circumstances are falling and we have to deal with it, or we don't. Quitting is always an option. Giving up is always an option. You can always switch jobs. You can go chase that greener grass. But the problem with that is that that means sacrificing the long-term goals and dreams that you have put in place that you want to do and that you want to be and you want to do with your family. I have a lot that goes through my head and I get pretty emotional when I say that because so many people will, one, they don't clearly define what they want. So it's hard for them to keep running. They have a nebulous idea of someday I want this, someday I want that. And that's not healthy. But it's also terrifying to write down your goals and write down what you really want. Because once you do that, then you are, I've said it before, you know what your terms for failure are. I think I got that, heard that originally with Jordan Peterson, but it's terrifying. It's scary to admit what you want and then start chasing after it. And then when you get to the times that are hard or struggling or frustrating, you have to keep going. You either have to keep going, keep working, figure out a way to work through it, or you have to give up on your dream. I'm not saying you don't need to do what you need to do to take care of your family. Everybody should do that. But I'm also saying that you cannot give up on your dream and your goal just simply because of frustration. Do some creative things, do some different things. If what you have and what you are doing is not working, then figure out something else to do, something else to go forward, some other way to approach it, something. Instead of sitting around feeling sorry for yourself and being desperate, figure out a way to do something different to move yourself forward and continue to pursue your dreams. And at the very least, if you do have to take a slight detour to make sure that your life stabilizes off a little bit and then goes back on track, the only way it goes back on track is if you never left the original track in the first place, that you're still all just going the same direction. It just looks a little different. Because the one thing that's for sure is you're going to have good times, you're going to have bad times. They're always going to come and go. It's a sine wave, up and down, up and down. And the work required when it's good is the same as the work required when it's bad. Now, how do you control that? How do you get away from that? Well, you can plan, you can save, you can put people in place, you can put systems in place to try and prevent that. But honestly, the best way that I've found, and this works most of the time, is you put in a ton more effort when things are going well, because that trough is eventually going to hit and come. And if you've already doubled down your efforts when things are going well, then that trough is much, much smaller because you've already loaded up the work that it's going to take to dig out of it and you front loaded it on that side. It's an old sales rep thing about front loading sales and front loading the work. But if you know you're going to have to dig out of something eventually and you can start digging early, it's a lot less effort and it helps keep that momentum going. But just because you're frustrated doesn't mean your momentum's broken. Just means you're in a dip, just means you're in a trough. You've got to keep going. Put your eye on the prize, never take it off, and keep running, keep digging, keep going. No matter how bad things look, they always get better. No matter how good things are, there will always be challenging times. If you deal with your frustration in a positive manner, no matter what part of life you're in, and I get, oh, Flint, you don't understand. This is bad. We're here. We're there. Da, 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 da. You know, we've all had trying times in our life before. We've all had times when we've had to stare the animal in the face and go, you know what, I'm coming anyway, whatever. It doesn't matter. We've all been there. We're not alone. But, you know, we start thinking we're alone and we get frustrated. We feel isolated. That's not healthy and it's not productive. So the first thing to do with that frustration is acknowledge it. Then you start taking action on it and you're going to continue to be frustrated. It's going to feel like everything that you do is going to just slap you in the face and kick you in the teeth. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's okay because you have to keep going. And if you do, you'll eventually come out the other side. And if you do it smart, you'll come out the other side even more healthy and stronger and more educated and more experienced than you did on the front side. Guys, I hope this helps. I know there's a lot of you out there that are struggling and suffering in your own brain when you don't need to be. You just need to get back to work and focus and work and trust the process. If you don't follow me on social media already, you'd want to do that. You want to follow me on all of the different platforms. I post different content on each one daily. Here every Thursday, Old Man Energy Podcast drops a new episode, sometimes long, sometimes short, sometimes me, just whatever we feel like talking about or whatever guest we have in here. We hope we keep you coming back for more. Make sure you like and subscribe so you can hear that. We do have a seminar coming up Saturday. I know this is dropping on on Friday afternoon at noon Eastern time. There are still some slots available for that. If you want to get in on that or the one for next month, I'm teaching a class on how to take your dreams and focus on them and train them into tasks that you need to do tomorrow. So if you missed out on this month's, then make sure you sign up for next month. And they're always updated at leadershiplegacycourse.com. Thank you all for joining me, and we will talk to you next Thursday. Love y'all.